Hey, Patrick Kelly, distinguished architect here at Zoom, as you can imagine. How many times do I have Zoom on this screen? One on my shirt, virtual filter. I have one on the on the slide. I have one on the footer of the slide. So I think you get the point. I've been here at Zoom for about a year and a half. And prior to working at Zoom, I worked at Microsoft for 14 years. So I spend a lot of times speaking with our customers, and every customer and every demographic and every vertical about the story of Zoom and Microsoft. Because most of the time, not every time, but most of the time, enterprises and consumers and educators and public sectors, financial services, have an enterprise Microsoft story. Rarely do you use Google for everything in the productivity suite or in the email suite. It could happen, certainly. We certainly see that happening, but more prevalent is the Microsoft strategy when it comes to, when I say Microsoft is a big ecosystem, right? They do more than just one or two things. They do hundreds, if not thousands of things, from Active Directory to identity to authentication to security to file repository with OneDrive and SharePoint to the Office 365 productivity suite of products with Office and Outlook and Excel and PowerPoint and Exchange for email. You get the point. It's hard not to be a Microsoft shop in some capacity, right? And then I guess more importantly is, why am I telling you? What does Zoom have to do with this strategy? Well, this is where we are laser focused. Zoom is laser focused on one thing and one thing only, and that's UCaS. And UCaS to most people is one of two things, right? Everybody can say UCaS is like digital transformation, right? It's a word that everybody says, but do they truly know what it means? And when I say that, everyone that knows UCaS stands for Unified Collaboration as a Service, right? Everyone knows that, right? Or does it stand for Unified Communication as a Service? And here's where we need to talk about this, right? Because I just said two C words, right? Collaboration and communication. They are not the same thing. They are distinctly different things in the modality of UCaS. It's under the umbrella of UCaS, but they are different modalities within that same context. And that's where we need to have a discussion, because let's do a little bit of a history of UCaS in the Microsoft world. A little bit, not much, right? Is that Microsoft has had many flavors of UCaS as a strategy. And if you're old like me and have a gray beard, you probably remember back in the day, they had Messenger back in Exchange. Then they had LCS 2003, LCS 2005, OCS, Links, Skype. Now it's evolved into Teams. And Teams was developed to be a Slack competitor, right? Slack came on board and showcased this amazing collaboration tool set, and Microsoft didn't have an answer. Skype was not the answer. So it developed Teams to be a collaboration competitor to Slack. This is where we start getting into this discussion, right? Because Teams, if you're a Microsoft shop, is a pretty amazing collaboration tool. It does everything really, really well. It's that single pane of glass into everything that an information worker or knowledge worker would like to do during the course of their day. It can instant message. It can do persistent chat. It can do channels. It can do private channels. It can then tie in all those Office 365 things like Office, like OneDrive, like SharePoint, file repository information, custom tabs, custom apps. It can pull in the Office 365 suite of products like PowerPoint and Word, and you can collaborate and co-author all these cool things that you're going to do on a day-to-day basis. Direct competitor to Slack. And it does it really, really well. And so I can understand as a Microsoft shop why you would choose to use Teams. Microsoft Teams is their collaboration tool set that you pay for when you pay for your E3 or E5 or F3 bundle, right? But part of your enterprise agreement, your enterprise contract with Microsoft has Teams included in their Office 365 suite of products, right? Along with Outlook and Excel and Word and all those other ones. Teams is part of that bundle that you're paying for. So leverage Teams, right? If it makes sense to you, if you're already using it for your collaboration needs, totally understand. But we live in a best-in-class world today, right? We live in a best-of-breed world today, in a society that accepts not one thing doing some things okay. We don't accept that anymore. We want one thing, maybe two or three, that does everything perfectly. Give you an example on your iPhone and your Android phone. How many apps do you have running on that thing? Probably a lot more than one that just does everything okay. That's not the world you live in. You might have 50, 60, 100 apps, and every single one of those does something unique and perfect for your either consumer, enterprise, or business need. You don't want one app that can do everything. I mean, that'd be great. That'd be utopia. One app that I could deploy, one app that I could support, one app that I could pay for, one app that I can admin or operate. That'd be great. We're not quite there yet sometimes. Sometimes we might need 2 or 3 apps to tell this entire vision story, those best-in-class apps. This is where we see a lot of customers of ours that are true Microsoft shops utilizing Microsoft technology, but they also utilize Zoom alongside that story. And what does that mean? How do we bring these two applications together, right? Because Teams is a collaboration app. It's also a communication app, just like Zoom is a collaboration app. Zoom has instant messaging, persistent chat. Zoom has channels and file repository integration with Drop and OneDrive and SharePoint. We have all that stuff too. But sometimes if you're already utilizing one vehicle for collaboration, it's hard to shift and forklift that out, but you also want to complement that story. Here's exactly where we see a lot of customers utilize that Zoom and Teams story together. Teams for that collaboration thing, right? All instant messaging and persistent chat. But now we talk about Zoom for communication. And when I say communication in this context, I'm talking about everything real time. I'm talking about Zoom meetings, right? Meetings are real time. I'm talking about audio, Zoom audio. I'm talking about Zoom video. I'm talking about Zoom screen sharing. I'm talking about Zoom webinars. I'm talking about Zoom breakout rooms. I'm talking about Zoom events. All these things that Zoom does perfectly in the part of unified communications. Finally, what about Zoom phone, right? You see the point. Collaboration in the Microsoft Teams world makes perfect sense, but communication in the Zoom world also makes perfect sense. So you might want to utilize these two together. And I'm going to kind of walk through some workflows of where we see where my experience in the field in the last 20 months, I guess, of this pandemic, of how are enterprises utilizing these two together? Well, let's kind of walk through some scenarios. By the way, this slide has nothing to do with what I'm about to talk about. I'm just always impressed with all the global data centers that we have. And to prove to you, not that you need proof, but to prove to you that I still use PowerPoint, even though I don't no longer work for Microsoft, I still use PowerPoint. I picked the craziest slide transition I could pick in the repertoire of Microsoft PowerPoint. And it is the open curtain act slide transition. It's my favorite because it's just so cheesy and unnecessary. All right, so let's dive into some use cases and some workflows of why you would utilize Zoom and Teams together. Number one, we see external meetings. External meetings is the number one use case why you would utilize Zoom over almost any competitor. When the pandemic started, Zoom had around 10 million users, right? But when the pandemic just really jumped into play and then everyone had to start working from home and everybody had to have a tool to do external communication with family, friends, coworkers, vendors, enterprises, partners, guess what happened? Zoom usage took off to around 400 million people. And why? The major reason is external meetings are very, very simple in the Zoom world, much more so than Microsoft or Cisco or pretty much any competitor. And please, just, you don't have to believe me. Try it yourself, right? And then maybe take a survey of the 400 million people that are utilizing Zoom for this functionality alone. Is external meetings is very, very simple. And when you're talking about, Susie in HR talking to Bob in accounting, right? There's really no revenue generated from that internal call. And you might utilize Teams for a quick, audio or even a video meeting between those two colleagues. But let's talk about Steve in sales, making 50 calls a day externally to partners and their customers and their vendors, trying to generate revenue. The last thing Steve in sales wants is friction in external meetings. Double clicks in to get into the meeting. 1, 2, 3, 6, 10 clicks to get into a meeting sometimes with our competitors. In the Zoom world, it's very, very simple. You get the URL to the meeting, you click on the meeting, you're in the meeting, right? Whether you have the client, whether you're using the Zoom browser, it's very, very, very simple. And that's why the adoption rate and user training and user adoption on Zoom is astronomical as compared to all of our competitors. It's just simple. It's just easy. Now think of Steve in sales making 50 calls a day times 5 days a week times 52 weeks a year. The last thing he needs is friction in his meetings, in his phone calls. He needs those to go smoothly, because every time it generates friction, anytime you do go to an external meeting with anybody else, there's going to be a delay, a friction, 5, 6, 7, 8 mouse clicks, 30, 40, 50 seconds of delay, times 50, times 5 days a week. You get the point. All that is generating revenue or not generating revenue, depending on which time you're waiting for your customer to join your meetings. That's what Zoom does. Makes it frictionless for you. Large meetings. Anybody can have a 2, 3, 4, 5 person meeting. Anybody can do that. We've been doing that for years and years and years. Everyone's been doing that. What about a 500 person meeting? What about a 1,000 person meeting? That's a large meeting, a real-time collaboration, large meeting with full video, full audio, full screen sharing and application sharing, full reactions. All this is built on the premise of why you choose Zoom to not only do external meetings, but large meetings. The quality between 2 people in a Zoom meeting is the same as 1,000. And I won't get too nerdy and talk about the whole architecture, design, and topology of our architecture and our QoS on our client and our dynamic codec and all. See, I'm getting a little bit nerdy. I'm going to stop myself. Basically, what I'm saying is the large meeting experience is the same as a small meeting experience in Zoom, and no other competitor can say that. Webinars. Okay, so now we've gone to, a couple of people in a meeting. We've gone to 1,000 people in a meeting. What if you have 10,000 people in a meeting? What if you have 50,000 people in a meeting? What tool are you going to use then? What if I told you can use the same tool for all 3 of these things so far? The same Zoom tool that you use for your external meetings, your internal meetings, your large meetings, your webinar. Remember we talked about Utopia being one tool that could do everything? So far, we're batting 1,000 here. Webinars, the ability to have very, very large meetings real time. Not a delayed broadcast of 60 to 90 seconds to a minute. That doesn't do anything, because that's real-time communication. How are you getting feedback from your customers in real time if you have a broadcast delay? You're not. That's the point. Webinars in the Zoom world have been around for several years. So we actually have a head start on pretty much everybody in this regard. And again, don't just believe me. Have your users test it out. Do a POC on webinars. See which product your customers and or your users will gravitate toward in its usability and functionality. Webinars is a monster that we see in the field of people utilizing Zoom in conjunction with other stuff. Breakout meetings, breakout rooms, the ability to have a large meeting, but sometimes during that large meeting, we want to maybe pull people out into breakout rooms, put people like 50 people in a room, have them discuss a topic by themselves for a while, and then pull them back into the meeting. How about that for an amazing training capacity? Obviously, in education, we can see that being very, very prevalent, but also in training. Everyone does some sort of training, no matter what vertical you're in. Wouldn't it be amazing to train a whole bunch of people, send them off to discuss it amongst themselves into maybe different verticals and silos that they have, and then bring them back utilizing the same client? Zoom client can do this. It's not a separate client, not a separate license. It's built in to the same Zoom client. We see this really happening a lot in the field. End-to-end encrypted meetings. This might not apply to every single meeting, again, not to get super nerdy, but we acquired a company called Keybase. And just like maybe Slack and Teams are great at collaboration, and Zoom has perfected communication, Keybase had perfected end-to-end encrypted meetings. We put that functionality into Zoom meetings now. So again, not to dive too deep into the security context, but no other competitor does it like we do. We can dynamically create end-to-end encrypted meetings in your Zoom client. Again, in your Zoom client. It's not a separate portal. It's not a separate license. It's built into your client. And you can do this dynamically. You're like, hey, most of the time you want to default to just a regular encrypted meeting. But what about an end-to-end encrypted meeting? Maybe you're a financial services customer. Maybe you're a healthcare customer. Maybe you're a public sector customer. And that end-to-end encrypted meeting is a part of your regulatory and compliance and security standards. We have it built in to the platform right here. Recorded meetings. Obviously, sometimes we're double, triple, quadruple booked during the day. We can't attend every single meeting. But wouldn't it be amazing if you could record the meeting that you're in with the same client? And then after that meeting is over, you could then share that recording with everyone that was supposed to be in the meeting, but they were double and triple booked and they weren't able to attend. You can seamlessly click just the share button in your recorded functionality of within your Zoom client and share this meeting directly with participants, internal and external. Again, an important concept here is it is not a separate license. It is not a separate portal. It is part of your Zoom client, built into your Zoom client. Not only meetings, but calls as well. What competitor can say they can do meetings and calls and phone calls all from the same capacity in the same client? No one can do that. And this is where we see Zoom being utilized a lot for these things. Operational readiness is a very big part of our cloud, of not only our, but the paradigm shift to cloud for all functionalities. Back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, people used to do operational readiness or business continuity, depending on how you would like to call it. Some people call it disaster recovery or high availability. Remember those times when we used to build like an email server? We put that in a data center A, right? And then somebody's like, well, what if that server goes down? You're like, oh, we better build 2 of those then. So we built 2 email servers in data center A. And then someone says, well, what if data center A goes down? You're like, well, we probably better build another email server in data center B. And what if that server goes down? You get the point. You have to layer on layer and layer and architecture and topology to get operational readiness happening. What if you were to use one client, we'll just say somebody, Cisco or Microsoft or anybody really for one of your UCaS needs? And what if that were to go down? What if that functionality were to go down for 10, 15, 20 hours? Let's just say that functionality went down. What would be your operational readiness plan? What's your business continuity plan? What if you had Zoom for your communication needs? And maybe one vendor is out, but the other one's up and running. Wouldn't that be an amazing story? If you're a CIO or a CTO, you're like, hey, operational readiness is, maybe I could see the use of 2 of these applications in the UCaS space that might be needed at the same time, just because if I were to have an outage, and not even be yours, right? It might be a cloud provider. It might be a PSTN line that's down from one vendor while the other PSTN line's up. It might be an internet circuit that's down while the other one's up. This is operational readiness in 2021. This is part of that plan. Quality. One of the most important parts of why Zoom was created is because of the quality. The way it's designed, from our multi-data center topology globally to our multi-vendor data center globally, from our in-house data centers, we have the ability to create this quality from a networking perspective that no one else can do. Not only from a network and architecture and topology perspective, but also from a client perspective. How our client is coded and the workflows and the media flows and the signal flows. Again, I won't get too deep here like a nerd, but just know that that topology and that technology behind underneath the hood is exactly why Zoom is superior in every topology and every modality and every function than our competitors. And again, don't just believe me. Wayne House did a study on this exact same thing. And Wayne House said, hey, I'm going to choose all these UCaS providers, and I'm going to test them on a perfect network and see how they perform. And guess what? On a perfect network, everyone performed pretty well. That's great. But we don't live in a perfect network world, right? Today, most of us are probably remote. Most of us might be at home or on the road or in the airport or at a customer site. So a perfect network does not exist. What a real world network is 10% packet loss, 30, 50, 70% packet loss during a meeting. How do all the competitors stack up then? Well, I can imagine you know who number one is, because I wouldn't bring it up in this presentation unless it was Zoom. Zoom excelled at every level of network architecture available. From perfect network to 70% packet loss, Zoom prevailed in every single modality. Try it. Again, don't just believe me. Don't just believe Wayne House. Try it yourself. See what kind of quality standard you have compared to all our competitors in the space. Zoom events is a relatively new one to this list I've added. We're still probably not getting to conferences anytime soon. Multi-day conference centers and convention centers anytime soon, probably. Maybe in 6, 12, 18 months. I have no idea. But we still have the need for those. We still have the need for multi-day conferences and multi-day events. And how are you going to hold those? Are you going to have a separate vendor do it? The answer is no, you don't have to. You can do it, by the way, in the same Zoom client that you're using for all these other functions. We held Zoomtopia in Zoom events, a multi-day conference with tens of thousands of users. We held in Zoom events using the Zoom client. That's the power of virtual events. That's the power of Zoom events. Finally, Zoom phone. There's a reason it's bold. There's a reason it's bigger than everything else. And it's the reason it's on top. It's probably the most important function and modality that we've had deployed in the last 2 years. And not only do we believe that, but over 2 million customers believe that as well. We talked about Utopia, right? Remember, one app that can do everything? All your meetings, all your webinars, your large meetings, your external meetings, your breakout rooms, your Zoom rooms, your conferencing rooms, your Zoom events, your virtual events. Now, throw in just basic PSTN phone usage into the same client. Did you not forget that I said that Zoom does collaboration as well? We do instant messaging. We have Zoom chat. If you watch Zoomtopia at all, you saw that we're putting a ton of effort and a ton of resources and a ton of engineering power into making that collaboration story as good as the communication story. Now you throw in Zoom phone and we have one client that can literally do everything from your UCaS needs. Thank you for your time. Patrick Kelly, Distinguished Architect, the coolest title at Zoom.